Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures at Outperform. I hope you're enjoying our series. Last week, we talked about the first episode of PWC's 27th annual Global CEO Survey. We said we'd be back this week to talk about it again. So here we are. I'm Frank Wander. I'm the CEO and founder of People Productive. I'm here with the amazing Terry Mays, certified culture engineer. We've got some real interesting stuff to talk about. So why don't we just go to the movie? What do you say, Terry?
Let's go to the movie.
We're going to go.
Yeah, this is a really good episode. We've been talking about this report that PWC does annually, and there's some really good insights in here that you can use to apply to your organization.
Yeah. Now, if you didn't make it to last week's episode, you can always look at it on YouTube or at the People Productive channel on LinkedIn. You can get it on Facebook. It's a good episode. In last week's episode, we talked about the productivity challenge. This report highlights the fact that when they interviewed these 4,700 CEOs globally, the theme emerged that in general, they feel 40% of the work their people do is just unproductive. They're wasting and losing time caught up in bureaucracy and other things that slows the companies down. That dovetails very closely with our work at People Productive, where we track the effective use of time and what influences the lack of productivity in many of these companies. And quite honestly, I would say, the 40% unproductive is generous, to be honest with you, in general, versus what we see. But today we're going to go through the other aspects of this report as we promised you. And if you want to get it, just go to PWC, type in their 27th Annual Global CEO Survey. You'll get it. Just came out January 15th of this year. Great report. And it talks about how existential threats are converging and many companies are taking steps to reinvent themselves. Will it be enough? We highlighted last week that because of the challenges of reinventing, 45% of the CEOs believe their company won't be viable in 10 years if it stays on its current path. Get a little bit deeper into this. Now, here's the reinvention imperative. And certainly we know companies have been working on continuous reinvention for years, some fast, many of them very slowly. And Tara, maybe you want to comment on this to start us off.
Yeah, so, when we start looking at and taking the covers back on this, we really want to see what people are thinking about their company and how you're scrolling on me, how they're thinking about reinventing themselves. What kind of company do they want to be? And so when you think about that high level of productivity or lack of productivity, I should say, and you think about the companies that want to reinvent themselves, it's almost an oxymoron. In order to reinvent yourself, you're going to have to become more productive. You're going to have to find those areas where you need to improve and stay in that continuous reinvention space. So you're constantly looking for ways to improve, ways to do things better, quicker, faster. How can I be more productive? And you have to get rid of the fat in the organization. You can't continue with that mindset of, oh, let's just go and do things the way we've always done, And I love this statement. As the pressure to adapt rises, more CEOs will prioritize big moves to support business model reinvention. It's going to be imperative to reinvent because times are changing. If you think about just the way business was before COVID and after COVID, things have just changed in a fundamental way that we are not going back to. Whether it's from the way that we have food delivery to the way that we have car delivery, where everything in between is changing. You see more companies are finding ways to market on social media. They're finding ways to do more online sales. Sales are higher than ever. Department stores are closing because their online sales are so high, whereas their in-store brick and mortar sales are low. We're just seeing it happen. There's this continuous space of change, and we need to embrace it and find ways to make sure that our companies are winning in those times of reinvention and not losing out.
Yeah. And, listen, it's not going back to the way it was ever. Brick and mortar is gone, not just in the stores, but in corporate headquarters. Those days of people coming to the office are gone. You see companies saying, we're going to call more people back to the office because they need to justify these huge, real estate contracts that they have and try to show that they're using them effectively. It's over. If you can lead from anywhere, hire from anywhere, and work from anywhere, that means you can get the best people from anywhere. You can assemble a team and you can lead. And if you're trying to force people back in the office, you lose that entire advantage. And so, things aren't going back to the way they were.
Yeah.
They're going to continue to change and evolve. So this notion of continuous reinvention, this is actually real. It is what matters. When new things appear, you've got to put your toe in the water and start working on them. Because if you wait, your competitors have got their toe in the water. They're building those skills. They're starting to learn how to use those new technologies or opportunities in their company. And now they're creating competitive advantage. They're far ahead. In the beginning, it's a competitive advantage. But as time goes on, it's just a competitive necessity. You're late and you missed it. So you must continuously reinvent. There's no other choice.
Yeah, these things are kind of coming to a head. There used to be a time where you could kind of take your time and think about things, but now the pace of change is so rapid, you really don't have enough time to sit and just be deep thinkers about it. I'm notoriously a deep thinker, but this is a time for action. This is a time to move so that you don't get left behind. You don't want to keep waiting and analyzing. You're going to get left behind if you continue in that space. And, Frank brought up a good point about companies forcing people to go back into the office. When you're hiring for folks that will only come into the office and you're not considering hiring people that can be remote, work remote, and make that as part of their benefits package, you really are doing yourself a disservice, because you end up settling for employees that will come into work as opposed to being able to hire the best possible person for the job. You end up taking that person that says, well, I will make the trek and come into the office, even though I may not need to come into the office, even though it's not important that I'm there. It's more of just, this is the rule, so we're going in the office. But we really do want to consider, am I getting the best person if I'm forcing myself down that path of hiring? Am I choosing, or missing out on better possible opportunities or better resources because I have these rules that have really become kind of outdated?
Oh, they're outdated. There's no question about it. That isn't changing. It's not going back, like you said. No, genie is not going back in the bottle.
No.
And, this whole thing about we're going to prioritize big moves. Here would be my advice. These big, huge programs and initiatives that companies have run over the years, get a ton of people on them. Let's figure out a digital strategy. We're going to reinvent everything. Those are always complete busts. You've got to be agile. You got to be able to break down what you have to do into small pieces, give small teams of really bright people things to work on, get it done, continuously deliver on the changes you have to make. Don't go big, because big fails. It just continues to fail all the time. I have never seen these big initiatives do anything but underperform or outright fail. Large investments of money, total busts, and humans just aren't wired to grasp that much material. It doesn't happen. The conscious mind runs at between 60 and 100 bits a second. The subconscious mind is 10 billion. So consciously, people just can't handle it. And it should be well known by now. I can't believe companies are still doing that. But let's move on a little bit through this. The impetus to reinvent is intensifying over the next 3 years. Here's the things they see that are going to be driving it versus the prior 3 years. Technological change still at the top, but moving up in terms of importance. What do you see missing from here, Tara? That's shocking to me.
Yeah, culture is absolutely something that should be right up there at the top.
Right at the top.
Have the culture that can support this type of an organization that's reinventing itself, that is agile, that's able to make some of those big moves quickly. If you don't have the culture for that, you're never going to be that type of an organization. You're going to be stuck in this is the way we've always done it. We've always been this way. This is how we're going to be. You've really got to address that elephant in the room, because culture is what will slow down everything. If you don't have the right kind of high energy, high efficiency culture, then you're going to struggle to do some of the things that you need to do.
Yeah. I mean, transformation begins with culture. You get the culture right, and then you can start to work on the transformation. Don't overscope it. Break it into pieces. Get a high performing culture where people work together in a very, very powerful way, and let them go, empower them, start to deliver these things. But culture should be at the top of this list, because the source of much of that 40% of lost costs is the fact that leaders don't know the human factors of productivity. They don't know how to drive them. And on a continuous basis, the leaders are wasting all of this talent potential. That's what's
Yeah.
really going on.
They don't have high collaboration teams. You've got to have teams that are cross-pollinated, not just siloed organizations anymore. That is just, it has to be a thing of the past. You've really got to get some teams that are cross-pollinated with all aspects of business so that you're able to have people that are thinking about it from the different perspectives. You can't afford any longer to just have one perspective and one voice in the room. You've got to have multiple voices, multiple diverse voices, so that you can actually hear all the different perspectives and make changes quickly and effectively.
Yeah, I agree with you. And just moving through the report, it says over the near term, CEOs feel less threatened. I would say don't get complacent, right? We are living in an age of disruption. The threats are there. You know, we talk about the fact, let this real estate go. Concentration risk is a threat to every enterprise at this point. Any form of concentration risk, being concentrated in one locale, being concentrated in one market, having all your people concentrated into a particular area. You've got to think differently. You've got to become resilient. You got to become agile. And if you're feeling less threatened, you should be really using that time to actually start changing your culture, transforming the way you work, and beginning to take advantage of this slight break in the action, because the action is going to continue.
Yeah.
And so we
Hey,
have,
Frank, go back up a little bit. I thought it was an interesting point that,
yeah,
over the near term, CEOs are feeling less threatened. Cyber risks is kind of not at the top of the list, which is what we would think would be one of the top things that CEOs are concerned about. You hear about all of the different types of phishing and all of the different scams that companies are running. And, there's old companies that are running scams and whole organizations that are designed to try to sneak in and steal resources and finances.
entire criminal industry running the dark web with tools and toolkits so people can get going. They share information. I mean, it is a huge threat, and it is an arms race. And they're investing heavily in the arms race to come in and cyber attack your company and steal things. And we know AI poses all sorts of new cyber threats. And so, yeah, that should be higher up on the list. I'm with you, Terry.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that it's not higher on the list.
Yeah, very interesting. I agree with you. So now, looming existential change, planetary work in progress. Here we're talking about basically decarbonization.
Yeah. So it's important for companies to consider their carbon footprint and, what are we doing to the ozone layer? What are we doing to our world? What kind of world are we leaving for the next generation? Historically, in areas like IT, for example, we hadn't really considered the carbon footprint of IT, but now companies are having to consider that. What are we doing to reduce our carbon footprint? How are we improving our energy efficiency? How are we being more considerate of how we sell our products and services to the consumers? And what kind of impact is technology having on our climate? That has really come to the forefront in a lot of companies where you're really concerned about the people, the processes, and the planet. You really do have to consider what kind of impact am I having on the world?
Oh, yeah. Humans have been very poor custodians of the planet, for sure. And I think every company should start to build a better planet. There's no question. Now, AI, we could talk about this. I think everybody's focused on it. Certainly this is going to have a big impact. We talked about it in the last show. We went into it a little bit, but it's going to impact, so many jobs that generate content. All this generative AI is unbelievably powerful, and it's still early days. So making sure that your people understand, how this might be used, getting people used to it. They're going to have, tools that allow them to do their job faster and better. And the people who are very good at using AI are going to be much more productive. And so you've got to look at this and start to embrace it. Look at how it's going to affect and impact the company, get your toe in the water, start to learn what it is. And then once you have a better understanding, you can build out a strategy. But get in there now, no question.
Absolutely. This is the time to build your teams, to have folks that are experimenting with AI, that are learning how you can use it better to better your organization, how you can use AI to do your job faster. How can you cut out some of the mundane things with technology? Let technology work for you. This is the time to do that.
And I'm kind of amazed here. You know, you disagree or agree. 32% of the CEOs responding said generative AI has been adopted across my company in the last 12 months. I would say that's an exaggeration. I think people have their toe in the water in the last 12 months and across
Yeah.
the company. You know,
Yeah, I
different.
would like to see those companies that have generative AI embedded across the company.
No way.
Maybe across certain divisions of the company, but the entire company, I would like to see that list of organizations.
12 months ago, you know, they weren't even really playing with ChatGPT,
Right.
you know, or any of these AI technologies that have come out. So, you know, look, you got to get your toe in the water. I don't think anybody's done it across the company. They may be playing with it, looking at it across the company, but it hasn't been adopted. That's for sure. I think in the next 12 months, we're going to see a lot more instances where people are using it for sure. Will generative AI enhance my company's ability to build trust with stakeholders? I guess we'll see. You know, there's a lot of things that generative AI can get wrong at the moment. So I think you got to be careful. It's both an opportunity and a risk.
Yeah. And I
And
think this goes right in alignment with the cyber risk.
yeah,
As generative AI gets better and better, that just increases the cyber risk. So I think, as we're embedding this technology across companies, it also brings with it inherent risks that we need to consider and be aware of.
big time, big time. And then we can come down here, your reinvention playbook, turn barriers into opportunities. Look, this is a time of great opportunity. It's also a time of great risk. You do have to have a reinvention playbook. You have to start looking at what are the barriers to you being able to move fast and get things done. We talked about culture. That's right up there. Another one that's right up at the top is the lack of institutional knowledge in these companies. So many of them looked at people as expenses and didn't understand where the talent assets were in the talent expenses. So they just basically destroyed their talent infrastructure. And, you know, they have people who maybe are gig workers, not that loyal to the company. Maybe they offshored a lot of stuff, so they lost control. They have no more of the institutional knowledge in their own house. They're going to have to really figure out what knowledge is critical. They're going to have to take ownership of it. They're going to have to grow it. They're going to have to put people who have high degrees of institutional knowledge in companies that are in cultures that are high performing, in projects that are high performing. They've got to get away from this old project model of, are tasks on time or not? It's whether the people are working together in a powerful way. They've got to measure the culture on these big projects and programs, continue to improve them. That's what matters. That's how you deliver stuff.
Yeah. Are we delivering value?
Yeah,
It's one thing to deliver a project on time, but was it what we needed to deliver? Was it delivered in the way that it needed to be delivered?
yeah.
There are so many things that we're not measuring on projects that we really should be considering, because that flows right back into our productivity. If we're not delivering value, you're not being productive. End of this discussion. Like, if you're not adding some value to the organization and bringing a level of excellence up a level, then you're not adding value and you're not being very productive.
You're
So there
over.
are a lot of things that you could be doing that would be you could be productive doing them, but if it's not, in the end of the day, adding some value, then is it really productive, or is it just busy work?
I mean, people have to reinvent themselves in these companies. That's what I see. I think that it's just not a challenge of the company being reinvented or the company coming to you and saying, hey, we want you to work on AI. We're going to make up time. People have to take this seriously. You have to reinvent yourself. You have to disrupt yourself. You've got to be your own kind of guide into the future. You've got to play with this stuff. You've got to get used to it. You don't wait for somebody to come to you to say, hey, you know, start learning AI. Go out, start digging into it. You could do a lot. If you're a programmer, Start looking at all these different tools that programmers are going to use to speed up the way they program. If you're designing graphics and stuff, go into the systems, the AI solutions that help you design that stuff faster and better. Build your own expertise. And I think that the people who do that are the ones who are raising their hand to be part of this transformation. And look at this list here. Lack of skills in my company's workforce. I think that's a piece of it, but it's lack of institutional knowledge I see that slows things down. People don't know stuff.
Yeah. And there are not enough people there. For the longest, organizations have been severely understaffed.
Yeah.
So when you're in that situation and you've got people wearing multiple hats, you're really not doing the best job that you could do because you've got too many things to do. So you're just kind of doing a little bit at a time and doing things as best you can. But that's really not a place of productivity. It's not a place where you want your people to be working consistently day in and day out.
Yeah. And look at these things. Lack of support from internal stakeholders. Boy, I mean, that's a CEO doing a really bad job, not getting buy-in, right? I mean, if you actually have a strategy and it is the right strategy and some people don't buy into it, I don't think they should be in those roles, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense to me. You got to deal with that. Lack of support from the board. You don't have a clear value prop. You haven't been able to go to the board to show how you're going to get it done. Or if you have lack of support from the board, maybe in fact you haven't been delivering and they're not sure you can deliver on this reinvention promise because you've got a lot of things that didn't go very well. I think you got to look in the mirror in these cases.
Yeah. You've got to see how you've been performing and then assess, how do I want to perform? What do I want to do next? And what are the gaps to get there? How do I get from point A to point B? And these are some real tough conversations. These are some real serious assessments of the people, the skill sets they have, the direction that the company is going in. All of those things really have to be examined. And then you have to determine, how do we get from where we are to where we need to be? And really take some steps as a leader to move the organization, because this is totally a leadership shift. This is going to be leadership driving the organization in the right direction. This won't
Absolutely.
happen from just bottom up mentality.
And when you go into companies and you measure the culture and ask, I trust our leaders, our executives to take us into a great future. A third of the people will say, no, I don't. There's lack of strategic trust in a lot of cases. People don't necessarily trust the executives. And once again, they don't know how to build a high-performing culture. They don't know how to ramp productivity, get things done in an agile way. I mean, there are a lot of very basic issues that I think they've got to address before they're going to reinvent themselves, or that 10 years will go by and they won't be here.
Yeah, very true.
Hey, Tara, I think that covers the report, honestly. Maybe we should talk about next week's show a little.
Yeah, let's do that.
Now, there's a great partner document that came out right at the beginning of the year from Josh Burson, probably, I'd say, the person who has the most followers of anybody who makes predictions about, the talent and HR tech marketplace. And, his prediction for 2024 was the global search for productivity. He's talked about productivity before. We're going to talk about this next week on our show. Very important topic. Josh Burson has gotten this stuff right time and time again. And so we're in an era where the productivity of the people really is going to matter. Anyway, we ran a little longish today, but we're here every Wednesday at 3:00. I hope you could join us next week when we look at Josh Burson's predictions for 2024. Shaping up to be a hell of a year, Tara,
Yes. Looking forward to it.
Yep. So anyway, hey, take care.